In the basketball world, ascending to the NBA requires an otherworldly level of skill and talent. So, how do you even dare to label a player as overrated? Well, facts don't fib, right? And sometimes the stories that swirl around them just seem way too hyped up when you dive into the cold hard stats or the staggering amounts of money they rake in. So, for today's video, let's look at the top 10 overrated players for this season. Starting off with the former Defensive Player of the Year, Rudy Gobert. When discussing potentially overrated players, it's worth considering the case of the Minnesota Timberwolves big man. Gobert has established his reputation as one of the league's finest defenders, except when it comes to the most crucial moments. You probably already know what we're talking about. There have been quite a few instances where he's been vulnerable in the postseason. And since we're discussing a player whose strength lies in that aspect of the game, struggling to maintain his impact during playoff games raises valid concerns, don't you think? Next up, we've got Luguentz Dort. He's mainly recognized for his defensive abilities, and that recognition seems justified. His defensive prowess has compensated for his offensive shortcomings, making him a positive contributor overall. But when it comes to offense, Dort, who's 24 years old, has struggled a lot, particularly as a high-volume shooter. Plus, you don't really see him contributing much in areas other than scoring to enhance his offensive impact. So, while Dort may not be widely seen as a future superstar and he's on a reasonable contract, it's important to acknowledge that his offensive struggles are more significant than they might appear at first glance. Moving on to DeMar DeRozan. This guy's widely known for his skill as an individual scorer with exceptional one-on-one abilities. With a career average of 21 points per game and being a six-time All-Star, even his offensive abilities are evident. But all of us can agree that DeRozan's inclusion on this list is because of a few limitations in his game that hinder team success. His scoring strengths work against his defensive abilities in the game, and that hasn't led to big wins for his team. Plus, he's not into teamwork, rarely shoots threes, and still prefers being the main guy. Because of this, he can't easily fit into a supporting role where you need to do more things. In fact, when you think about it, it's interesting that throughout most of his career, his teams usually do better when he's not playing. Next up, we've got Julius Randle. Yes, the player once hailed as a potential savior for the Lakers has fallen back a bit. His journey began with challenges, but he gradually showcased his abilities as a scorer and rebounder. And eventually, his hard work paid off. He had a breakthrough with the Pelicans and appeared to be on the path to stardom. But it looks like after an all-star season with the Knicks, Randle's decline was both confusing and concerning. His defensive performance was subpar, and he struggled to evade double teams while attacking on offense. Now, let's talk about Kawhi Leonard. If we're hypothetically selecting players for a championship contending team based solely on their abilities and guaranteed good health, this guy would likely be a top 10 pick, but in reality, his health situation can't be ignored when assessing his value. While it's not his fault, the fact remains that Leonard, a two-time champion, two-time Defensive Player of the Year, and two-time Finals MVP, has struggled to maintain his peak performance over a full season. He's played 60 games or less each year since 2016-2017 and has experienced significant knee injuries requiring surgery in the last two postseasons. At 32 years old, with a history of health issues that suggest he'll miss at least 30-plus games, he really can't be considered among the league's elite players. That's it, unless you're evaluating his performance on a per-minute basis. Load management is a necessity to preserve his health during the regular season, but it can impact his team's playoff seeding. And even with careful management, his recent playoff injuries raise doubts about his ability to perform at his best when it matters most. So, while being a great player for 50 games is commendable, Leonard's inability to be consistently available has become his defining characteristic. Regrettably, we must acknowledge that he no longer belongs in the top tier of NBA superstars. Next, we've got R.J. Barrett. Despite having career averages of 18.1 points and 2.8 assists at just 23 years old, this guy has struggled as one of the least effective shooters in the league throughout his career. His overall impact on plus-minus for the Knicks has also been notably negative. Excluding free throws, Barrett has scored worse than what an average shooter would have achieved normally. Plus, over his 4 seasons, the Knicks have performed 1.9 points worse per 100 possessions when Barrett is on the court compared to when he's not. Despite being considered a potential cornerstone for the franchise, Barrett's performance metrics have raised concerns. While he still has time to improve, being 23 years old and displaying glimpses of point-forward capabilities, his current stats show a challenging start to his career. Moving on, we have Jonas Valanciunas. He may seem impressive when viewed through a traditional lens, reminding us of a star player from the past, but his statistics for the 2022-2023 season don't align well with the modern style of play. While the Pelicans valued his post-up scoring abilities last season, his efficiency in this area ranked in the 56th percentile with .98 points per attempt. Valanciunas' preference for post-up plays can be an issue for teams that want to spread out on the court and create space for driving, as it reduces his effectiveness on offense. Also, the real challenge arises on defense, where his lack of mobility causes him to struggle in pick-and-roll situations. He has trouble defending against guards and often moves back towards the basket, leaving openings for opponents. So, despite his toughness and competitive spirit, Valanciunas' strengths don't necessarily translate to winning outcomes. Meanwhile, his weaknesses can secretly hurt his team's chances of doing well. Now we've got Trae Young. This player has consistently posted impressive stats since joining the league, yet it hasn't always translated to victories. Apart from their Eastern Conference Finals appearance in 2021, the Atlanta Hawks have struggled to perform well. Considering this, it's difficult to exclude the all-star guard from discussions about being overrated. And what strengthens this argument even more is that Young produces high offensive numbers but lacks effectiveness on the defensive side. Next up, let's talk about Dillon Brooks. He might not have ended up in this situation if he had signed a more modest contract after leaving the Grizzlies, but the Rockets stepped in and offered the defensive-minded 27-year-old a substantial 4-year deal, potentially reaching $90 million with bonuses. This is a huge sum for a player who had the lowest box plus-minus among those who played over 2,000 minutes in the previous season. Brooks is known for his defense, but his offensive impact isn't the best, you could say. Among players who took a lot of shots last season, he had the lowest true shooting percentage. But his offensive struggles aren't new. He's always had trouble scoring efficiently, and this is a problem, especially for a wing player who's expected to score well. Plus, his confrontational style can lead to problems on the court. The Rockets paid a lot of money for him, even though his actions on the court don't seem to be helpful based on statistics and the Grizzlies' approach to his free agency. Last but not least, we've got Fred VanVleet. If we look back at the very start of the 2022-2023 season, things were looking pretty good for him. He had a career-high 42% three-point shooting in his first 10 games, and his defense was solid. He did have a brief setback with a sore back, missing 3 games, but he performed well in the 4 games after that. But then his performance took a hit after missing 3 out of the next 5 games due to a non-COVID illness, and it hasn't been the same since then. VanVleet's performance drop is due in part to how defenses are guarding him. He's known as a great shooter, so teams are closing out on him more aggressively. This has led to him taking fewer catch-and-shoot threes this season. Opponents are forcing him to either pass the ball or drive inside, which has been a challenge for him in the past. And to add to all this, he's also been getting fewer wide-open three-point attempts where the nearest defender is far away compared to before. So, yeah, it's gotten pretty bad. Well, that's all for today, guys. Which of these overrated NBA players surprises you the most? And do you think they'll be able to overcome these challenges to reach their full potential? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell for more basketball content. Thanks for watching.